Generally, I don't care for US freight routes in Train Sim World, and that's the main reason why I haven't reviewed any of them until now. I felt like making at least one exception for the Clinchfield Railroad, although, in my opinion, this one is still disappointing for a variety of reasons. Because I absolutely despise cutting to a different shot until the entire train has passed, and the freight trains on this route are pretty long, there might be less clips in this video than the amount I normally record. In any case, feel free to take a drink every time I say the word Clinchfield throughout this video, but preferably a non-alcoholic drink at that. The Clinchfield Railroad add-on was released in April 2021, and the version compatible with TSW5 costs $43.59 NZD at full price. For reference, I play the PC version of TSW and always buy add-ons on Steam. This route is set in 1976, and consequently unique for being the only retro US route in TSW. As for route coverage, you get the 34-mile-long section of the main line from Elkhorn City, Kentucky to Dante, Virginia. Incidentally, the original TS Classic version continued further south to St. Paul, Virginia. The TSW version also has a quartet of branch lines that add a total of 27 miles to the overall route length, and I remember that the non-linear nature of this route was the main reason why I bought it in the first place, although that was before I realised how little there is to do here. The specific branches that were included are the 5-mile-long Hasey branch, 14-mile-long Fremont branch, 2-mile-long McClure Spur, and a 6-mile-long Nora Spur. I don't know anything about the history of those branches, so I'll move on to the motive power. On the motive power scene, this add-on includes the classic EMD F7A, F7B, and SD40 diesel locomotives. Not a particularly good offering considering the sheer variety of EMD and GE locomotives that were part of the Clinchfield's fleet. I'm disappointed in the inclusion of only one livery for each locomotive, since, in real life, the F7s also ran in black, and the SD40s also ran in grey. The EMD F7 is one of the iconic F-unit or streamliner designs, with a staggering 3,855 examples of the type having been built between 1949 and 1953. The Clinchfield Railroad had 24 F7As on their roster, supplemented by 13 examples of the F7B variant. This thing is quite unusual because she's the only cabless locomotive we've ever had in Train Sim World. For the longest time, I was confused as to why the in-game model never showed the number of the famous Clinchfield 800. But more recently, I realised that this model might only be set up to depict CRR numbers 806 to 803, which were actually built to F7A specifications from new, while 800 was originally built as an F3A. As for the SD40, this is a predecessor to the more well-known SD40-2, with 1,268 examples of this earlier type having been built between January 1968 and August 1972. Clinchfield had 25 of them on their roster, numbered from 3000 to 3024, and these particular engines were built over a span of 5 years beginning in 1966. For comparison, here's a Clinchfield SD40 alongside a BNSF SD40-2. The latter comes with the Cajon Pass route. Besides this BNSF variant, there's another SD40-2 in Union Pacific colours that comes with Cane Creek, a route that I refuse to buy, and a CSX variant that comes with Sandpatch grade. This one is supplied in either the YN2 or YN3B livery. Because it's set in the days before flashing rear-end devices, or FRED for short, this DLC comes with a caboose, and one of the things I like to do on this route is ride in the caboose and watch the scenery from there, although I forget exactly what type of caboose this is. As for freight wagons, you only get 4 different types, specifically the 70 and 100-ton coal hoppers, a red boxcar, and a yellow refrigerated boxcar, aka reefer. This leaves next to no room for a varied rail scene, but on the plus side, the reefer has functioning doors and a fully modelled interior, just like the 12-ton vans that come with the BR Heavy Freight Pack. Originally, Dovetail reused that god-awful horn sound from the CSX Sandpatch grade locomotives on the Clinchfield SD40, but this has since been patched with the same horn sound that you get on that otherwise half-assed CSX Stealth SD40 reskin that they released in February 2022 as part of the New Journeys expansion pack. I once had a couple of mod packs installed for the Clinchfield route, but I don't know if they were ever made compatible with TSW4, let alone 5. Even in its default state, I don't mind the sound of the F7A's horn, although it sounds better inside the cab. As someone who prefers busier routes, I think the 24-hour timetable on the Clinchfield Railroad is the weakest aspect of this DLC. You've only got a measly 48 playable services in total, 27 for the SD40 and 19 for the F7A. For all I know, the Spartan timetable may be realistic, but I barely know anything about the real Clinchfield Railroad. In any case, it's really only 12 services for the F7A, since the first Greenbrier turn is split into 8 parts. Besides the multi-part coal jobs, there are only 10 other services for the F7A, and these are manifest or coal trains along the main line. In this case, I was driving a northbounder service towards Elkhorn City called Florida Perishable, or something of that nature. It took me around 1 hour and 24 minutes to cover the whole route, and the highest speed you can get up to is only 30 miles per hour. One of the F7A's services involves shunting coal wagons at a chute next to the main line at Berta Junction. This can be difficult because the F7A is not ideal for shunting duties, owing to the full-width engine hood behind the cab, which severely reduces visibility when you're going backwards, and if you prefer to stay in the cab view. In terms of the basic shape, the F7A is sort of like the American equivalent of the New Zealand Railway's DG class, although the DG was built by English Electric as opposed to EMD. As for the SD40, her situation is no better than the F7A, as she technically only has 9 playable services. The Nora turn and McClure shifter are split into 10 and 4 parts respectively, but for some confusing reason, parts 3 and 4 of the Nora turn are not on the list of playable services. Only 6 SD40 and 22 F7A services run in daylight, leaving the route looking and feeling very quiet indeed. One of the reasons why I've never really cared for US freight routes is because of just how difficult it is to control the heavy trains. One time, I remember playing the Greenbrier branch scenario, which involved taking an empty coal train down the branch line that meets the main line at Berta Junction, using a trio of F7s with the B unit in the middle. This was quite difficult due to a ridiculous speed limit of 10 miles per hour for most of the way down to the main line, and it didn't help that the wagons trailing behind were very heavy, albeit empty. As I'm a bit claustrophobic, I've always thought that, despite being on standard gauge, the route just feels very cramped due to it running through narrow valleys for just about its entire length. but despite the general lack of any wide open fields, the foliage detail is still very inconsistent. There are still some big patches of flat and undetailed grass textures throughout the route, and they can really spoil the scene. For reference, these ones were found at the Moss Tipple, and I found several more cases along the main line as I went from Dante to Elkhorn City. Meanwhile, the F7A and F7B don't have any engine room detail modelled, for whatever reason. And as a result, when you're looking through the porthole windows, it looks as if you're just staring into the void. The Spartan timetable and severely limited rolling stock offering are the main reasons why I am disappointed in the Clinchfield Railroad add-on, and I don't think I can recommend it to other TSW players. I'm also confused as to why DTG have never released another locomotive add-on for this route. Something like the EMD SD40 or General Electric U36C would have been much appreciated. Hell, they could have just added the Clinchfield grey livery for the SD40 and black livery for the F7s as a gameplay pack, as much as I hate gameplay packs. Considering the fact that Clinchfield is not as famous as the Pennsylvania Railroad, Southern Pacific, Chicago and Northwestern, or other fallen flags that haven't come to mind yet, I wonder why Dovetail bothered making a Clinchfield route in the first place. I'm also confused as to why they have never made another US route for TSW that's set in the 20th century, following Clinchfield, regardless of whether it's a freight-only or mixed traffic route. I like the idea of driving vintage diesel locomotives such as the EMD F7A, or any of the old streamliners for that matter, and the shunting operations can be interesting, or tedious depending on which way you look at it, but this add-on could have been so much better than what we actually got. At this point, I don't expect the route to ever get better because it feels like yet another case of Dovetail abandoning previous DLC and leaving it to rot while they focus on the next add-on, thus continuing the vicious cycle of Train Sim World. Thinking back to Clinchfield, this route gets a 5 out of 10 from me. It's not bad per se, but it's not outstanding. It just exists.